This is Rugby Roundup. Coming up, Richard Hill gives his verdict on the Esher match, Bevan Armitage talks about Moseley's defeat, and we preview Bees against Plymouth. Hello and welcome to Rugby Roundup. I'm joined by rugby correspondent Brian Dick. Hello Brian.
Hi Chrissy.
Well, first up it's Worcester, and they got a victory, but they probably wanted more points from that match.
Well, they did. They went into this game hoping to score more than the 48 they managed when they played away at Esher. And for the first 10 minutes, 12 minutes, it looked as though they were bang on course for that. They scored 2 tries, and they really were pounding Esher to pieces. But for some reason, as we'll hear Richard Hill say in a minute, they stopped playing. They started throwing the ball wide. They did without earning the right to go wide, and it was just bizarre. And maybe it's my lack of understanding of the game, but I don't see how international professional rugby players can find an area of dominance, of superiority, the way they had done against Esher so early on, and then just completely ignore it and choose to do something else. It was a very, very strange situation. And then to compound it, the fans are telling them they're going too wide. Richard Hill told them at half time they were going too wide too early, and they still went out and did the same thing in the second half. Although on a couple of occasions, like Bruce Douglas's try, when they did keep it narrow, they had more success. So it was very strange to see, what should be a slick and well-oiled side making such basic errors. But a victory is a victory, and they are top of the league.
Well, as you said, let's hear what Richard Hill had to say after the match.
It's not good enough. We've just got to try and keep that concentration for longer. But players were throwing balls around. It's like watching, I wouldn't say barbarians rugby, because barbarians would be better than that. But we were just very, very loose. People in the crowd behind me were shouting, "It's too loose, too loose." And they were absolutely right. I don't know what we were trying to do there. We wanted to get the 4 tries as soon as possible to get the bonus point. And you've got to be clinical and just be very simple and direct against Esher, and it would have come very easily. But we tried to make life very difficult for ourselves, and the ball was just being thrown around all over the place for some reason, and that's not what we do in training. So I don't know what was going wrong there at all. That's certainly not what we do in the training, and certainly not what we said we were going to do leading up to the game. But a win's a win, but they're going to have another roasting again next week.
So that was Richard Hill. Doncaster up next. Tough one?
Depending on which Doncaster side turns out, potentially it could be difficult. Yeah, I suppose the one area that Worcester have been strong is when they've been away from home against the better sides, against the London Welshes and the Bedfords, and Doncaster having started poorly are in the top half of the table now. So if Worcester aren't on the money straight away, and their intensity isn't there, then it potentially could be a difficult game. However, if they continue with this trait of starting from minute 1 against the better against when they're on their travels, then it's clearly a game they will probably win.
So now let's turn our attention to Moseley. Another disappointing defeat.
It was a self-inflicted defeat as well. They went to Bristol knowing that if they could win, they'd drag Bristol back into the relegation picture and do a lot for their own chances of getting out of the bottom 4. With that in mind, the way they started was totally sloppy. They were giving away penalty after penalty. Adrian Jarvis kicked 4 in the first half. That's 12 points. They slip off a couple of tackles. There's 2 tries there. They're 26-6 down. Before they've even registered an interest in the match. And we'll hear Bevan Armitage and tell us that it was what happened in that first half hour that ultimately cost them, because when they did play as they did in the second half, they got back to within 4 points and had an opportunity to actually take the lead. So it wasn't a Herculean task that was ahead of them, because Bristol are nervy and they can be beaten as Bees have proved. So for Moseley to start so poorly, it was just such a frustration to the players and to Ian Smith.
Well, after the match, we caught up with Bevan Armitage.
I think in the first half we were still asleep, didn't really come out of the blocks. And if you give a team like Bristol a start like that, it's hard for us to come back in the second half. I thought we played well in the second half.
Yeah.
Could at least earn a point out of the game.
You gave away so many penalties in the first half. What was that interpretation, or was that your own fault? Did you think?
I think that was our own fault. Ill discipline at the breakdowns.
Yeah.
And then Jarvis punished us from that, didn't he?
Yeah, and then it was always going to be a long way back. 26-6, wasn't it?
Yeah. You can't give anyone in this league a score like that and then try to come back in the second half. It's a hard mountain to climb.
Yeah.
as we found it in the second half.
That was a disappointed Bevan Armitage. Who's up next for Moseley?
Well, they've got Bedford this weekend, assuming the game goes ahead. They're going to make a call on that in the next 24 hours. Bedford, they owe Bedford one. This was where the away game was where Moseley's season started going awry. They played terribly for a half at Goldington Road. Completely dropped off the pace, and they've not really cured that habit ever since that day. So, then they're really they can't afford to take half off. They can't afford to take 5 minutes off against Bedford, because Bedford, they're second in the table, and they're not far off, being as good as Worcester on their day. So Moseley really do need a big performance at home, having finally won a home game. So yeah, it's a big one for Moseley if it goes ahead.
Well, as you said, the weather has been causing problems, and one casualty was the Bees match against Cornish Pirates. They're up in action next against Plymouth.
That's right. The frozen pitch cost them the game on last Sunday. That's been rescheduled for December the 15th, a midweek game between two British and Irish Cup matches. So they won't put a lot of stool on their Cup matches, and they'll be able to target the rearranged league match. They go to Plymouth now. This really it's a big game. I know I seem to be saying that every week with Bees, but this is one. If they win, they cut Plymouth's advantage, 6-point advantage, down to 2, possibly 1 point. If they lose, Plymouth is potentially 13 points ahead of them, and any hopes of getting out of that bottom four, the distant as it is at the moment. But they've virtually disappeared over the horizon if they lose to Plymouth this weekend.
Thanks, Brian, and thank you for watching. We'll be back next Thursday with analysis of those matches. Bye for now.